Hey, ni hao. Welcome back to Vox Terra. Ni hao, ni means you, hao means good. It's generally translated as hello, but really it means you good. And I open with this today because today we're going to talk about, isn't there always something in the news bad about China? Lately, it's been the lab leak theory. Now, or really it should be called hypothesis, because according to one scientist I knew when I was younger, theory is actually the closest we have to reality. It's the science's closest version of reality. It's a theory. It's a testable explanation for why things are happening how they're happening. A hypothesis is more like an educated guess. But I'm not really going to dive into that deeply. What I'm going to look at instead is let's question why. Why would media outlets, public PR firms, politicians, why would they be interested in amplifying this hypothesis? Why would they be interested in really emphasizing it? What's being distracted from? What other stories are being deflected from? Interest being taken away from by emphasizing something or other bad about China? What kind of mood will it create in the public? And what will that hostile, angry mood achieve? Now people have different motives for wanting to amplify a story. Be it good, and how do we define good, of course, or be it bad, and how do we define bad? So I starting back in the early 90s, I came to believe that China bashing, because really, if you grew up in America anyway, you've grown up with China bashing, probably in a lot of the English-speaking world. The China bashing is really a way to deflect attention from problems at home, troubles at home, and protect business as usual. In particular, subsidized, entrenched, powerful, polluting industries. Here's the example where I started to think this. I remember arguing with people, debating in favor of, let's start to reduce our fossil fuel consumption. And people would tell me, and they didn't make this up because I hear from different people, so they're getting from somewhere, we can't afford to do that because of competition from China or threat from China. But that was early 1990s, and in those days, they had a really small pollution impact. They were just coming online as a capitalist economy. And they were coming online as a capitalist economy based on agreements made between Richard Nixon, the United States, and I believe it was Deng Xiaoping at the time. Part of that agreement was what they call the One China policy, that eventually someday in the future, China and Taiwan will reunite. Just as somewhat of an aside here. Now, my initial feeling at the outset of this pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, is that this should have just really brought to everyone's attention, what we're doing to our environment. Why? Well, look, first of all, we had to lock everything down to necessary services. The air got cleaner, the stars got brighter because of all that light pollution being curbed, and people should have stopped and reflected, wow, we curb things in necessary businesses, our life quality could actually improve. So what are we really doing racing around buying and selling? Second, there was a lot of pushback against closing everything in necessary activities only because people got to make money. So that should have said, boy, if we can't even stop this system of constant consumption, constant buying and selling that everybody's trapped in, to stop the spread of a deadly disease, we should be looking at that. Third, regarding the pandemic, I shared with you early on, articles going back to at least 2011, probably way earlier, that a heating planet, deforestation, factory farming, just general disregard for our environment is going to usher in a new era of pandemic and disease. So by all this focus on China, take your eyes off of that. Well, another thing facilitated by this constant China bashing is what President Eisenhower referred to as the military-industrial complex. Because if you're always feeling under threat, you're going to tolerate a giant, massive defense spending. You're going to tolerate a massive buildup of nuclear weaponry. You're going to tolerate, your country's having troops stationed all over the planet. And this is an interesting point here where a leftist, and by I mean leftist, I mean people who are maybe challenging the corporate establishment, that kind of thing. I don't necessarily mean liberal, but leftists would try to say, well, both sides are the same, Biden, Trump. And there's elements of truth to that, and there's elements of not truth to that. Okay, I do think when it comes to the environment and a more reasonable governance, we're head and shoulders better off with Biden. But there is some truth in that. Okay, I showed you in a video about Trump with the Blackwater pardons and the Trump administration's connections with at least the military contractors. I did do a video about Biden's connection through Llyod Austin with the Raytheon and defense contractors. So ICAN, which stands for International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, pointed out that during the pandemic, spending on nuclear weaponry has increased. And that Biden is basically continuing Trump's expansion and upgrading of our nuclear weapons arsenal. And this has been worldwide, because if one nation's doing it, then others are going to feel threatened and feel compelled to do it. And who benefits from that? Well, again, weapons manufacturers. Now, you might be of the philosophy, as I was at one point in my life, well, this is doing us good. This is protecting us. Well, look, I for one thing, don't forget, there's a lot of radioactive hazards with the nuclear weapons buildup. You got a place called Hanford, the Hanford site, which is a very, wide range of contaminated area. Also, an acquaintance of mine when I was much younger had a brother, maybe a brother-in-law, who was a serviceman who worked with a lot of the uranium-tipped bullets. And his child was born, tragically with some serious birth defects. Well, radioactive exposure is a known, what's called a mutagen, a birth defect causer. So again, whatever nation's harboring these massive nuclear arsenals is paying a price themselves for it. So then, ironically, the threat from China or competition from China also softens the public up for subsidizing, favored industries at home under the excuse of threat from China. Now in some cases, I could see this as a good outcome in terms of if it's, subsidizing renewable energies or that kind of thing. But the road to getting there, I don't think is healthy. And I point out it's ironic because one of the rotating, complaints we'll hear about China in our media is, they're subsidizing their industries, they're playing unfair. But then here we are, we got to subsidize our industries. So really, what's the rule? What's the rule? They've crossed the line and we haven't. It's all murky, isn't it? And it creates a feeling, if you were there, if you're in China, it probably creates a feeling of a double standard. And that feeling of a double standard goes back to something called the Opium Wars that I never learned about growing up in school. I bet most of my fellow Gen Xers didn't learn about it either. So the Opium Wars is where Great Britain burned down the Chinese Navy. This was in the colonial era, or in the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution, burned down the Chinese Navy because the emperor said, we're not going to purchase opium from Britain. And that was portrayed in the media at the time as, hey, they're not doing fair trade. So that's they're not playing fair has been going on since the Opium Wars. So now we think about these trade wars today, trade wars, quote unquote, and you'll have a president, thumping their chest about, hey, look, I got China to buy stuff from us, so they're buying all kinds of things. Well, what are the things, again, is that really benefiting us, okay, or them? Okay, what are the things, right? Like, agricultural products is one of them. Now let's think about the nature of those agricultural products. Are they purchasing, the trade, these trade deals, which by the way are another form of subsidy, right? Because now you got the government negotiating for specific industries, which is another form of subsidy, is supposedly a free market. Well, which farmers are benefiting here? Is it the small mom and pop organic farmer who's out there working the soil with no pesticides, bringing the locals in their community healthy produce, a way a lot of people would like to earn a living if they thought they could afford it? Or is it supporting the major agribusiness, which has got genetically modified crops? And they're modified. We often hear, it's, helps out. But they're modified often to be resistant, to be able to survive heavy applications of pesticides and herbicides. That's where their resistance comes in. And what happens there is that those heavy farmers using those and all those pesticides, they drift over to someone else's crop who isn't using them, kill their crops. So, and supposedly regulations are bad and all that, but here's the deregulated killing their crops. That's a whole other issue, right? So that's who's getting, benefited, is that method of farming, factory farming, pork. How are those poor pigs raised, right? They're raised, in horrible conditions in the big factory farms. An intelligent animal. So that doesn't do us at home any good. We got now, because this China bashing or any bashing really lends itself to supporting the nuclear weapons industry, contaminated soil at home, contaminated servicemen. Supports factory farming, more pesticides in our own area, workers getting hit with contaminations as well as the public. And then the Chinese farmers are getting put out of business. The locals who want to, have that same local, support network, they're getting put out of business. And because they're feeling threatened by us now, their public's going to support, their own nuclear weapons industry, their own more aggressive posture. Also, that story started really breaking at the same time. The lab leak hypothesis was also breaking at the same time when it was making some news headway that our major patent holders for the pharmaceuticals for the vaccines didn't want to share the patent with other manufacturers, thus slowing down the global spread of that vaccine, thus facilitating the global growth of new variants that could one day outsmart the vaccine. It is a distraction from that, in my opinion, or a deflection. Now, again, if the motive of highlighting the lab leak hypothesis because you are concerned or once concerned about gain function research, okay, that's a valid motive. If you're concerned about lack of regulation, that's a valid motive. But I question these media outlets that really like to pump that up. Are they really calling for better regulation at home? Look at it through the bigger picture. Okay, what are we doing? That's the saying in the Bible. Look at the mote in thine own eye before you go criticizing your neighbor. So if you look at it, how can we curb lab leaks at home? Maybe we should have some international treaty against gain function. Maybe we should have international treaties against these types of research. Maybe we should have international treaties regulating, pharmaceutical research better. Well, is a lot of just constant media barrage against China, is that going to facilitate a world with better treaties? Do the people doing that think it's going to facilitate a world with better treaties? Or is it really just done to distract from change at home and protect business as usual? And lastly, this constant China bashing, it really does facilitate prejudice against people who look Asian and maybe are living in America or England or Canada. It facilitates prejudice against them. There's this constant China bashing. And I feel some people, doing it are aware of that. I think that's really plausible. Some people really wanting to amplify bad news are aware of that. And think about it, just this general vague mood created in the public, where is it going to lead? Is it going to lead to a cleaner, healthier country? Is it going to lead us out of any of the troubles we've had? A lifetime of just more pollution, more consumption, more pumping our earth full of greenhouse gases and carcinogens? Is it going to lead away from any of that? I don't think so. So hey, I hope you found this video super helpful, super informative, super interesting, agree or disagree. And until next time, please subscribe to my channel, click that notification bell, comment, like, share the videos to help get the word out there and help build this channel up to something interesting. And until next time, peace be with you.